1, 2, 3, 4.
Screen time, screen time, screen time, screen time.
It's my screen time too.
Screen time.
Hello, and welcome to It's My Screen Time Too, the podcast where two moms went to see A Star is Born in a movie theater together. It was amazing.
It was.
I'm Deborah.
And I'm Katie.
And I have an 8-year-old named Tony and twin 5-year-olds named Libby and Nate.
And I have a 3-year-old named Jay and a 2-month-old named Kenny. Our kids are pretty darn adorable, aren't they?
They are.
Wow,
really
that sounded
adorable.
uncertain. So usually we start the episode with a little story about how adorable or occasionally awful our kids are so we can get all of that out of our systems before we start with the real talk. And it sounds like Deborah has something to share. Deborah?
Well, Nathan has decided to be a quote-unquote supergood.
Okay.
And he's a pretty good kid, pretty even-keeled, isn't defiant like the other two can be sometimes. But now he's like sweeping up after himself in the kitchen, which he has never done before unprompted. Putting the lid back on the toothpaste tube unprompted. He's helping to set the table, and he seems sincere about it, but I just feel like there's an ulterior motive, and I need to figure out what that is. I'll keep you posted. We do give them a allowance bonus sometimes if they're do something extra. So maybe that's it. I don't know. We'll see.
Maybe it's just a competitive thing so he can hold it over his siblings' heads.
Yeah, or maybe he's just a good person and wants to be good, but that can't be it.
Yeah, no. No way. Sorry, Deborah, you're a good mom, but humans. Okay, so when you were here last week, you experienced firsthand this really weird thing that Jay does that we never taught him to do, but that I love, which is that he won't come out of his room in the morning unless he is told that he can come out.
Oh, yeah.
And this is going to sound like a humble brag because I know a lot of parents struggle with that, like their kids coming out of the room at like 5 a.m. and being like, let's start the day. And they have to get those special clocks that like turn green at the time that it's okay for the kid to come out of the room. Mm-hmm. But Jay will wake up and like stay in his room and play until it's time, until one of us says, hey buddy, you can come out. And he just did this on his own. And he doesn't do it at bedtime. At bedtime, he's horrible and he will try and chase you out of the room because he does not want to be there. Only in the mornings. Mm-hmm. But the other day he was like talking and making noise in his room. So I used the little walkie-talkie function on the baby monitor, which is pretty much all we use it for anymore, to tell him he could come out. And he goes, I'm just reading a book.
Aww.
And it was just the sweetest thing that like he wanted to stay in his room a little bit longer because he was reading a book. And I mean, he's not really reading it. He's just sitting there turning the pages, but it was so adorable and such a mom nerd catnip moment.
Isn't that the best when they just want to read some more?
Yeah.
That's the best. Unless you have to leave for school.
That's true. Yes, that is a problem.
Then put the book down.
Yeah. So that was the sweet thing that he said the other day. And, you know, I'll keep you posted. I'm sure he will grow out of this awesome habit that I really love. Kevin says he kind of just wants Jay to get up on his own. And I'm like, why would we get rid of this when it's kind of awesome that he'll just stay in there?
Yeah. If he just wants to get up and play, I wouldn't mess with that.
Yeah, it's nice to have a little peace in the mornings.
So any changes to your screen time policy?
No, we're still operating on new baby screen time. I mean, I guess we've probably lessened it a little bit, and you know, we're slowly tapering back as our lives become a little bit less just crazy face. How about you?
Mm-hmm. No real changes. My kids have stopped watching those awful Minecraft videos with Jen and Pat on YouTube, but now Tony has started watching Roblox videos, which is basically pictures of people playing Roblox, which is a Website, I think with a lot of video games,
Mm-hmm.
I let them play on my computer. I just don't love the idea of kids watching other people playing video games, but that's what they all do. So,
Now, I could be totally wrong. So, listeners, if I'm really off base about this, please let me know. But isn't there like an entire adult subscription? And I say adult not in a porny way, but like an entire
mhm.
subscription channel called Twitch, which is
Yes.
essentially this for like adults
Yes.
to sit and watch other people play video games?
Yeah, it's a thing.
Wow. I don't get
What a
it.
weird world we live in.
I don't get it for
It's so
grown-ups. I don't get it for kids. I just don't get it.
weird.
This is not for me. It's crazy that we are coming up on the holidays already.
I know. So I love Thanksgiving. It might be my favorite holiday, but it's also the marker by which I allow myself to play Christmas carols
Mm-hmm.
and watch holiday music, movies, and decorate the house and stuff. So, yay. How about you?
I am also a fan of Thanksgiving. I obviously find it stressful because I find everything stressful, but I wanted to bring it up specifically because we'll probably do a holiday episode where we watch like a holiday show or a holiday movie. And I don't think the streaming services have really hinted at whether they're releasing anything new. So I just wanted to put a call out to our listeners if they see anything that's coming up that they want us to talk about for the holidays. We probably won't be able to do one of the ones that are in theaters. I know there are a lot of cool looking holiday movies coming out, but I can't see movies reliably yet.
Yeah, the Nutcracker one by Disney is definitely on my list. And
Mhm.
so if anybody goes to see that, tell us what it's like because I want to go and I'm afraid it might be too scary to bring my kids along.
It looks beautiful just in the trailers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yes, if anyone knows about anything on par with All I Want for Christmas Is You coming out this year, let us know and we will cover it a couple episodes from now in a holiday episode.
Yes, thank you. Speaking of beautiful movies, that brings us to today's topic. We watched Paddington 2 because we keep hearing about how good it is. It's a feature-length movie directed by Paul King. It was released in 2017. It has a 100% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And it won some awards, not necessarily mainstream awards like you or I follow, like Emmys and Academy Awards. It won some International Online Cinema Awards. Anyway, it's available on Amazon to rent. That's where I watched it. It also purportedly was available to rent on my cable service, but I got an error message when I tried to do that.
Ugh.
Thanks a lot, Xfinity. And most people might be familiar with the Paddington book series, which were published starting in 1958, written by Michael Bond and Peggy Fortnum. Although the characters are based on the books, this plot does not, I believe, come directly from the plots of the books.
Mhm.
And people loved this movie. I listened to this podcast called The Daily Zeitgeist, which I'm sure I've mentioned before because they're my lifeline to current events. And they always ask their guests what is something overrated and what is something underrated. And like several people said Paddington 2 was underrated.
How is
And
it
we have watched-
underrated? Literally everybody says they loved it.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe when it was in theaters it didn't get enough love and it didn't get like nominated for any of those
That's true.
mainstream
That's true.
Oscars, Golden Globes, that kind of thing. But it's so hard for an animated or a kids movie.
Yeah, if it's not Pixar.
Yeah. And we watched White Fang, which is a disappointment. So it's just been a little while since we watched a movie.
It was about time. So I have a feeling I know where the general trend of our thoughts are going to go about Paddington 2, but can you tell me if you read the Paddington books as a kid?
I think I did. It was familiar. I have a friend who lives in Scotland, and she was living in England for a while, and she sent Tony some Paddington books when he was really little.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've read them to my kids
Mm-hmm.
more recently because of this friend who exported them to us. How about you?
Quite literally, the only memory I had of Paddington, oh yeah, of Paddington was just the broad strokes of him being in the train station with a card on him that said, I don't even remember the exact words, but take care of this bear. Um,
Yeah.
and that was all I remembered. Like I knew he was in the blue coat with the yellow hat. It's yellow in the books, isn't
Red.
it? Red? Okay.
Red.
See, I didn't even know that. But like when it comes to children's books about bears, I was really more of a corduroy girl,
Yeah. I like corduroy.
and that's just the one book. Had you seen the first movie prior to watching Paddington 2?
No, but it is available on Netflix.
Yes, I will tell you that it was also very good.
Okay. But didn't get the same. Has it just been out longer and people are no longer talking about it? It just was even on my radar one bit like Paddington 2 has been.
Yeah, and I don't think I watched it until after Paddington 2 started getting all of this buzz. It wasn't quite the star-studded parade of every British actor ever that Paddington 2 is, but it had similar sensibilities. So the great thing about Paddington 2 was that it was able to take what is essentially a simplistic child-friendly plot and make it appealing to a wider audience. So I was wondering what you think the secret to doing that is.
I think in this case, it was the characters that made it so good.
Mm-hmm.
You get a glimpse at the beginning of the characters and their flaws.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the end of the movie, they kind of make good on those flaws. And they're just so likable.
Mm-hmm.
And you just want them to succeed. And even the villain, played by Hugh Grant, he plays it with depth and humor. And so you are even kind of rooting for the villain, or at least I was in a weird way. So I just thought the character development was so good.
Mm-hmm. And we've talked before about how important it is in kids shows and kids movies, of the non-animated variety, for the actors to really commit and really dig into the more like goofy elements of doing a kids production. And I think we can't state enough how committed all of these actors were to their roles, no matter how silly they were. Do you want to try just a really quick plot summary?
Sure. So we see Paddington's origin story, and he's like fished out of a raging river by Lucy and her husband, who have been thinking about going to London. And then it's really sweet. Lucy says, I guess we can't go to London now because we have a cub. It was very Moses-like. Like he's just this baby floating on a river and is rescued. And then we see him living with the Browns, and he's just kind of like the charming fixture of the neighborhood. And he goes to see his friend Mr. Gruber, who owns an antique store. And in the books that we have, Paddington's main companion is Mr. Gruber.
Oh, okay.
And Mr. Gruber shows him this like exquisite and very rare pop-up book about the city of London. Paddington decides he wants to buy it for his Aunt Lucy's birthday, but he needs the money. It's very expensive. So he tries to find a job. Eventually, he successfully washes windows. And at one point, I don't know if he's washing windows or not at this point, but he sees a thief breaking into Mr. Gruber's antique shop. He chases the thief. He's the main suspect. He gets sent to prison for stealing this book, even though the book was not in his possession. This is getting long. He like befriends all of these hardened criminals in prison and just like warms up the place. And meanwhile, his family, the Browns, they are working on solving this mystery. When Paddington breaks out of prison, they all figure it out and catch the criminal and get a hold of the book. And the Browns have brought Lucy to London, and Paddington is reunited with his Aunt Lucy. Oh, I'm gonna tear up.
Yeah. So a beautiful summary, and so sweet and warm-hearted, and I mean, safe to say that I think we both liked it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really good.
And I was thinking too what the secret was to making adults care for children's movies when obviously the plots aren't very complex. And one of the things that I really appreciated about Paddington and Paddington 2 were the great sort of throwaway gags that would kind of go over a kid's head, but that parents would get. And, you know, they're different from the throwaway gags in a lot of other movies when, you know, they make them about sex or something that, like, kids don't get, but parents are supposed to jokingly laugh at. These were not inappropriate for kids. Like, if you sat down and explained all of these to kids, they wouldn't be scarred. They probably wouldn't think they were super funny. But there was a great scene where someone was reading a newspaper when Paddington got thrown into jail, and the headlines in the newspaper were hilarious. It was like, warden throws a party at the county jail, and get out of jail free card not legally binding. Those were the headlines in the newspaper. And it was just this attention to detail that was really great and rewarding for an adult that might not be watching the movie as much for the plot. So you have read the Paddington books far more recently than I, if I ever did read them as a child, and I clearly don't remember. And obviously, we said before, the plot of these movies, both Paddington and Paddington 2, don't really line up with the plot of the books. How do you feel when movie adaptations really diverge a lot from their subject matter?
I think in this case it's good because reading the original Paddington text, he makes lots and lots of references to coming from darkest Peru. And it's just unsettling to read. Like, it's like the Babar books, and it's just that overtone of colonialism. And I just feel like I can't present that to my kids in a way without explaining it, but they're too young to have me lecture them on the ills of colonialism. So I liked this because there was none of that problematic references to Darkest Peru.
They actually do talk quite a bit about Darkest Peru in the first movie.
Oh, really?
So
okay.
You should watch it and let me know if it rubs you the wrong way.
Okay.
I think my gut reaction when, like, I see a movie adaptation of a very short children's book is to hate it instinctively, but that's often totally unnecessary because we recently watched the new Peter Rabbit movie that just came out last year, and that was fine. And Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, which is a book I loved as a kid, those movies were great. So there's no reason for me to have this reflexive, like, ooh, don't touch my childhood favorites attitude about it. But for some reason, that is still my first impulse, even though I loved this movie. And I like Paddington 1 as well. But like you were saying, they can be a really good chance to correct the outdated and problematic issues with the books we read as children.
Going back to the plot of the children's books, like the Paddington books are actually kind of boring. Like the plot is really simple, and just the marmalade sandwiches shtick gets old. So I think this was a huge improvement on the books. Do you want to move on to animation? Because I do not know how they did this. It was incredible.
It was really great. And I think we should have watched some like bonus content to really find out how the technology works. Like, are the actors talking to a blank space, or do they have like
An
a guy in a
Serkis
suit?
there.
Is Andy Serkis there? Yeah. Because it is really seamlessly integrated. And God, CGI has just come so far. I know that's a very simplistic thing to say because technology, but compared to some of the earlier like human and CGI interaction movies, this was just amazing.
Yeah, like there's a scene when Paddington is he thinks his family has forgotten him and he's really lonely lying in his prison cell all alone, and I mean it's you just can feel his emotion, and it's so well done, and like his facial expressions and his eyes and everything are so believable. I was really willing to suspend my disbelief.
And they track a single tear as it falls from his eye, and it like rolls over his nose and affects the color of his nose in the way that like a tear tracking on a bear's nose presumably would. It just incredible attention to detail.
Yeah, there was also a sequence that I really liked. It's when he's looking at the pop-up book and the pop-up book kind of comes to life and he's in it.
Oh,
And I could have watched a whole movie in that style of animation. That was amazing as
beautiful.
well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a really beautiful shot. And there were a lot of moments that just were magical moments on screen. Like when Paddington escapes from prison, they escape in a hot air balloon. Yeah. And there's this moment of like the hot air balloon floating over the Thames. And you can see like the London skyline. And it was just like if you could take a snapshot of that, it was just perfect.
And even how the scene like cut away and showed it went from like a model prison to the real prison, and it was very like stagecraft the way they did it, and showed the prisoners like jumping into the tunnel, but you had a view as an audience member from the outside. It was, I don't really have the theater vocabulary to describe this, but it was great.
Yeah, it was it gave London a very storybook quality. And a sense of theatricality that was really lovely. Speaking of theatricality, what did you think of the cast?
Oh my God. Hugh Grant was so great. He plays weird and creepy really well. There's a scene where he's like in this creepy attic talking to these mannequins who are dressed up as different characters, and he does all these different accents. Really good. And Sally Hawkins, I've only seen her in The Shape of Water before, and she doesn't speak, and she was great in this one.
Yeah, she's so warm, and I have loved her since she did this movie in, I want to say 2005, but don't quote me on that, called Happy Go Lucky, that I would really recommend. That was where I discovered her and have loved her ever since. And I quite liked Shape of Water, again, as just like a beautiful movie that had a lot of moments where you were like, oh, could I just take a picture of that and put it on my wall?
The cast was not very diverse, like the main characters. And they, just because the Browns were white in the books doesn't mean they have to necessarily be white in the movie version of this, I feel like. But the extras and minor characters were diverse, so I guess that counts for something.
Yeah, that's true. It's hard for me to fault them because I just so loved all of the actors that they chose. Hugh Bonneville, who I had only seen previously in Downton Abbey, so funny and again, so warm in like his blustering way. And the kids have grown up to be not super awkward in the way that like some kids, when they're in like a earlier movie and then they're cast later in the sequel, you're like, ooh maybe not. But I thought they were great. And Julie Walters, who played Mrs. Bird, I'm not sure, she's supposed to be a grandmother maybe.
Yeah, it wasn't really clear.
And maybe they explained it in the first movie and I
role
forgot.
in the family.
But she was hilarious. I had totally forgotten she was Mrs.
Mhm.
Weasley in the Harry Potter movies because she was so different.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing that I really wanted to point out, casting wise, is that our dear friend Onion from Apple and Onion had a small
Oh.
cameo.
Oh.
He played the CSI during Paddington's trial, who was like pointing out all the different places that marmalade was spread in the antique shop.
Oh gosh. Wow. Good catch.
So everyone truly was in this movie. What did you think of Ben Whishaw, who voiced Paddington?
I thought he was great because Paddington is like, he's not a grown-up bear exactly, but he's not a young kid. And so I thought the voice, even though he got sentenced to prison for 10 years, but whatever. I thought it struck a good in between. Like, is he an adolescent bear? I don't know, but it was believable.
Well, you know, Deborah, the British criminal justice system is horribly prejudiced against bears. They always get the maximum sentencing.
Poor Paddington. What did you think?
He's one of those actors that I really want to like.
Hmm.
And I liked him in his role in the new Bond movies. He plays Q in the new Bond movies. But then I
Okay.
feel like everything else he does is like too arty for me. Like I can
Okay.
never get into it. And I so want to be behind his career because I think, well, he's quite cute for one. And you know, like I said, I liked him in the Bond movies, but I can't get into it. Moving on from the cast, I wanted to ask you because you always pay more attention to these things than I do. What did you think of the band and the ambient music that kind of follows Paddington around?
I thought it was good. So there's a few songs by sort of like a bossa or Caribbean type sounding band. At one point, they are playing on a window washing platform as Paddington is like washing windows of a skyscraper. And the tunes were recognizable to me, but I didn't write them down. I thought it was just enough. I
Mhm.
liked it. I thought it was good.
And this was a continuation from the first movie where they also played a part. And I really liked that addition too. Again, it contributed to the theatricality of it all. And I mean, everyone likes to think that their life has a soundtrack and that there could potentially be like a backup band narrating
Mhm.
everything going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just me? No? Okay.
And also the credits were amazing because in the credits, Hugh Grant is in this big musical number, and there's even a tap dance sequence. It's so good. So good.
It was hilarious.
So if you're watching this movie, stay for the credits. It was really good.
Definitely, definitely.
We already gave away the plot of the movie, but I don't want to give it all away. But I just have to say that Sally Hawkins is a great underwater actress. Like, I was so invested in that underwater scene, and I was like, there's no way this movie can end this way. They can't do it. And they did, and they didn't. But, like, it brought me back to The Shape of Water a little bit, which is a movie I really liked. I know not everybody did, but she was so good.
Yeah,
So
their
if
faces, Paddington's face and Sally Hawkins' face during that underwater scene, there were so many just moments that made you genuinely emotional, even watching
Yeah.
it as an adult. Like, oh. Oh my gosh. Side note, toffee apples make a big appearance in the movie, which
Yes.
is, I guess, it's a Britishism for candied apples. They look like candied apples and not caramel apples. I think candied apples are the worst thing ever, and I wish that they hadn't been given quite a prominent role in this movie.
Oh, really? See, I thought that was kind of so like the little brother, for example, in the beginning of the movie, he's like trying to be cool and leave his boyhood obsession with steam engines behind and become J-Doc, like a cool kid. But then at the end of the movie, like the steam engine knowledge comes in handy.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he views as his flaw becomes his saving grace. And like I thought the same thing about the candied apples. Like Paddington is just obsessed with food and is always getting distracted by food. And then at the main action sequence, he like gets sidetracked by like candied apples, and you're like, no, Paddington, come on.
Eyes on
But
the
it turns
prize.
out he uses them to like maneuver himself along a moving train, which his downfall becomes his saving grace. So I wouldn't want to eat a candied apple. They're disgusting, but I liked how they were featured in this film.
I agree that they were used well, but come on, how do you even eat them? Like, they have this weird hard shell, but it's like too big for it to be like a piece of hard candy that you would just pop into your mouth. Like, how do you even get at the apple? It's disgusting, guys.
You just don't.
You just carry it
don't.
around listlessly until you decide you've had it long enough you can justify throwing it away.
Yeah. So did this compare to any adult movie or show to you? Were you able to make a comparison?
I actually was, because I tend to get really jealous of movies or television shows that I don't want to say just have a strong sense of place, because there are a lot of shows where people talk about how the city is a character, blah, blah, blah. But it's not only that, but like have a strong sense of place and community. I want to live there. Like, I want to live in that little corner of London where like everybody knows me in my neighborhood. And maybe it's because I moved around a lot in my adult life. Like, I just really want that sense of community. So I tend to get really jealous. And this movie, Paddington 2, made me feel that about Paddington's neighborhood. And it really reminded me of my first reaction upon seeing the movie Amélie. Have you seen that one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It does. It has the same sort of effect, the way they portray the city of Paris and how magical it is, and Amélie's little corner of Paris with these eccentric characters. It felt similarly to me. It hit me in the same spot. How about you?
I thought it reminded me of any Wes Anderson film I've ever seen in terms of the... Oh, no. Katie's rolling her eyes. But Wes Anderson is like, every single detail is really thought through, from the color of the undershirt that somebody's wearing to the music that's playing. And I just thought the way the frames were shot, the way London was portrayed, like the light, the lighting, everything, it reminded me of the incredibly detailed way that Wes Anderson films play.
I can follow you there, but as you know, I hate Wes Anderson. And I think the main distinction I would give it is just that, like, the things Wes Anderson does are so meticulous, but they lack any sense of joy, and the plot is always really dull.
Yeah, this was a completely unironic film. So in that way, it is not at all like a Wes Anderson film. It was just like the look of it.
Yes.
Reminded me.
Agreed. Did you cast the gritty HBO reboot?
It's hard to beat Hugh Grant.
Yep.
But if there is a Paddington 3, I hope that Jeffrey Rush shows up.
He's a good villain too. That's a good point.
And then you've gotten me watching The Good Place, and the actress Jamila from The Good Place. She is so great, and her accent is so fantastic. I hope that she plays some role in Paddington 3. That's all I have, though.
So I kept thinking about all the things I loved about this movie, which was like the wonderful, warm portrayal of the city. And if we were to rethink it as a gritty HBO show, how it would be like a really gritty London, right? Like a gritty, grimy, depressing London. And I kept having the song, "It's Hard Out There for a Pimp," but like, it's hard out there for a bear, running through my head. So I thought we would just essentially do like a version of The Wire, but with CGI.
I like it.
And the Paddington would have like a really gruff voice. I'm thinking like a Jeffrey Wright or someone, like with a really like good growly voice. Yeah, that's what I got.
I like it. So, was it better when we were kids?
No. I mean, obviously, we both loved movies when we were kids with like a sense of passion, but like if we watch those movies again now, I'm sure they would be crap.
Yeah, Mary Poppins was good. That came to mind just because, again, the setting
Mm-hmm.
and it takes place in London and the accents and stuff. It's not really the same thing as Paddington 2. But no, nothing I watched when I was a kid was better than Paddington 2.
Have you watched Mary Poppins lately?
I have.
And you didn't find it to be super long?
I think I love the music from that movie so much
Mhm.
that no, I can endure however long however long it is.
Ooh, speaking of new movies coming out for the holidays, callback. Are you excited for Mary Poppins Returns?
I would definitely watch it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But in the original, Dick Van Dyke is so good.
I know. He has a cameo in the new one.
Really?
Yeah.
Yay. Can't
Mhm.
wait.
And, his role is kind of taken over by one Mr. Lin-Manuel Miranda. Podcast word cloud favorite. So, as far as people to get to take on his mantle, that's not a bad get.
Right. Would you ever watch Paddington 2 alone voluntarily?
Oh, heck yes. It gives me all the warm, snuggly feelings. It's the perfect sort of movie for kind of, I think, a glum, dreary day outside and a nice cup of tea and some cozy slippers.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely want to see Paddington. I'm willing to watch that by myself. According to IMDb, Paul King has a couple of upcoming movies, Pinocchio and Willy Wonka. I'm going to see those. I'm a huge fan of his now.
Wait, are they doing another adaptation of Charlie Chocolate? Charlie Chocolate? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory?
Per IMDb, he's signed on to it, so.
I mean, I would want them to because I really hated the Tim Burton version.
Was that with Johnny Depp?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Johnny Depp can go away for a while.
With the Jack White haircut? I digress. Do you think this is good for our kids? I watched this. I'll answer that first. I watched this by myself, and I cannot wait to watch it with my kids.
Yeah, I watched it with Jay, and there were totally enough, just funny as heck kids moments. Like when Paddington gets all wrapped up in the
Electric Razor?
Yes, and he's just
Yeah.
shaking all around the barbershop. Jay was just cackling like a maniac. It was great. I would 100% endorse watching this with your kids.
Ratings?
No shocker here. 5 stars for me.
Same. It was so good, you guys.
Yeah, we hope you enjoyed our hot take. This just in, Paddington 2, good movie. All right, well, thanks guys for listening to this episode of It's My Screen Time too. Do you like listening to our show? If so, please give us a rating and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It helps other people find the show. And even if you don't feel like writing a review, you can just tell a friend about us. Or if you'd like, you could make an intricate pop-up book that includes elaborate clues about how much you love our show. And you can tell us all about how you did that on Facebook at facebook.com/myscreentime2. And that's also where you'll find out what we're covering in our next episode if you want to watch along with us. Or you can tweet us with show or movie suggestions or any general comments about how much you love toffee apples or anything like that at myscreentime2. Or you can email us at myscreentime2@gmail.com. Our theme music was composed and performed by Deborah and her adorable children, and our podcast is produced by me, Katie. Tune in next time for more real talk about the movies and TV beloved by kids and tolerated by parents. Bye!
Bye.
Screen time. Screen time. Screen time.
My screen time.